A very good evening to all my students. I welcome you all to the second session on the Union Budget 2026-27. I hope that you are carrying the handout from yesterday as well as today, because in our session today, we will be using our handout so as to have a good understanding of the numbers and the data and the trend given in the budget. So what is today's session all about? So today's session, Bacho, is about understanding some of the numbers, data and trend given in the budget so that we can directly use them to answer question in prelims and mains. And of course, if you have a good understanding of these things, when you appear in the interview, you sound more confident because you will understand the blueprint of the government policies very well. You see, if you understand the budget and the economic survey well, your understanding of newspaper also improves. You will see the reasons for everything. You will have a background in the mind when you read the newspaper articles also. So whether you are aspiring to appear in the UPSC this year, 2026 or 2027, for both the cases, this discussion is crucial and important for you. So without wasting time, Bacho, let us start the discussion. You can keep your handouts open. I'll keep pointing out when to use the handout and when to have a look at the board. Today, you can also, if you feel that your calculations are a little slow, you can also make use of calculator, because the aim is not to focus on calculation. The aim is to get some results which we can use to understand the underlying phenomenon in the economy. So keep your calculators ready, keep your handout ready, and also focus on the PPTs that I have created for you. So let us start. So Bacho, if you see the board, you can clearly see that there are two, very daunting kind of tables in front of you. So if you see this, I have directly taken it from economic survey, by the way. Now, what is this table all about? Look carefully. It is also given in your handout. Handout number 1, which I gave to you yesterday, it's there. So if you check your handout, you will see that there is this table, which is table number 1, 2.A. So this is from the first chapter of economic survey. This table is also from the first chapter of economic survey, table 2. So I want you to have a good look at the table, guys. And you have a task. You have to tell me what is the most important thing, in your opinion, that you think is hidden in this table. What will you take away from this table? From UPSC perspective, mind you. So I'm giving you 30 seconds. Please take 30 seconds. And please let me know that from this table, what is the most important thing that you feel should be taken out from exam perspective? Data, facts, demand side, okay. What else? Manufacturing sector numbers, all right. I'm seeing your response. Guys, feel free to participate. It is your class only. It is meant for you only. So please feel free to participate, give your answers so that we can have a nice interactive session which helps you to learn, which helps you to find out your mistake. Because at the end of the day, we have to learn it really well. So without your participation, it is not possible. So please do participate and tell me what is the most important thing that you see is hidden here. Okay, I'm getting a lot of answers. Some of you are saying trend, mining and quarrying, absolutely. Demand, trend, range. All right. Future projections, very nice. So in fact, all your answers are correct. Absolutely. This is one of the ways to look at the various sectors of the economy. Okay, I'll tell you. What is the most important thing that I feel that we should take away from this table? Absolutely, absolutely. So without going into the numbers, first I want you to have a good look at something, because after this, I'll give you a task. So today's lecture, Bacho, is full of tasks which you will have to perform. We'll have a super interactive session today so that your learning actually improves. So guys, see, if you look at this table, the most important thing from the table to note here is number 1, this is called as agriculture and allied activities. See carefully. Directly, you can learn these things from NCERT, but we can also see these things from economic survey and the budget. So you can clearly see that this is the first sector of the economy. If you divide the economy into various sectors, so how will you divide the economy into various sectors? Number 1, agriculture, livestock, forestry, and fishing. This is called as agriculture and allied activities. That is number 1. Okay. Number 2, industrial sector. Now, what is there in the industrial sector? Let us look at the components. So if you look at the industrial sector, you can see some components there. Number A, mining and quarrying. Number B, manufacturing. Number C, electricity, gas and water supply and other utility services. This is also called as public utilities. Number D is construction, right? So what are the components of industries that have been taken here? Mining and quarrying, manufacturing, electricity, gas and water supply, and number D is construction. And then the third sector which is there in the economy is service sector. Let us look at the components of the service sector. Number A, trade, hotel, transport, communication, service related to broadcasting. This is number A. Number B is financial, real estate, professional services. And number C is public administration, defense and other services. That's number C. So what is the most important thing that you will take from here? And I strongly suggest that if you have a notebook, we should start making notes also. It will really help. So I'll tell you what to note. So let's start some of the important things that we have to note here as well. Likhe, please write. So please give a small title and please write 3 sectors of the economy. You should write it and maintain a good speed, guys. 3 sectors of the economy, okay? So what is the first sector that you will write? Very good evening, kids. So for the first sector you will write, the first sector that you should write is agriculture, livestock, forestry and fishing. Number 2, you should write industries, and within industry, you should mention that there are 4 subsectors of industry. The first is mining and quarrying, second is manufacturing, third is electricity, gas, water supply, public utilities, and fourth is construction. These are the 4 subsectors within the industrial sector. And what is our reference point? Our reference point is the economic survey chapter number 1, where this division is given this year, and the budget also follows the same. And what is the third? Third is service sector. All right, so now it is clear that which sectors are we talking about? Agriculture and allied activities, industry and services. This is the first thing to note. Agriculture, allied activities, then you write industries. Within industries, you please note down these 4. And then you write services. Services may, since it's there in your handout, you don't need to write the details, just write services. This is the first thing I want you to write. So, आप कैसे लिखोगे? You will write like this: agriculture and allied activities. Number 2, industries. Within industry, you should write mining and quarrying. Number B, you should write manufacturing. Number C, you should write public utilities. Number D, construction. And number 3, services. Okay. Now, we don't need to look at the table for data. For data, I have got a simplified table for you, which will help you to understand the data even better. Let me show you the table. For that, you need to come to today's handout. So if you come to today's handout, you can see that on page number 1, I have given you some data. This is what is given on page number 1 of today's handout. See, bacho. So what do you see here? It says sectoral composition of nominal gross value added FY 25-26. Okay, sectoral. So I want you to learn this art, that whenever you see this kind of table, like whenever you see this kind of data, how do you pick up the points from there? And what do you conclude from here? So karte hain, let us do this. So guys, if you see, this is the whole economy. Ye pura economy hai. This is our whole economy, right? In this economy, suppose that our total gross value added is 100 rupees. So what is the gross value added? 100 rupees. In this 100 rupees, imagine this is the 100 rupees gross value added. In this 100 rupees, let us look at the contribution of agriculture and allied activities. So can you please tell me what is the contribution of agriculture and allied activities from this data that is provided to you? If I provide you this data for any particular year, you can easily give the answer if you learn this trick once. So what is the contribution of agriculture? 17%. So let's write here in front of agriculture 17%. So if you open today's handout, handout number 2. Today's handout is handout number 2. There, if you see the bottom of the page, wahan pe you can clearly see that this is just a sample to train you about how to use the data from economic survey and the budget. So you can clearly fill this table, which is what is the contribution of agriculture here in our gross value added? 17%. Very nice. Dekho, India is a big country. So our numbers don't change much. Some year it will be 16, some year it will be 17, somewhere it is 16.5, some year it will be 17, something like this. Let us manage with this data and let us see what is there. So what is the contribution of agriculture here? 17. Yes, today's handout. Now, what is the contribution of industries in our gross value added? How will you find this out? contribution of industries, right? So can you please tell me which are the subsectors that you will add to get the contribution of industries? Can you check and tell me? So what will you add first? Manufacturing. So let us see where is manufacturing. 14. After manufacturing, absolutely. Electricity, gas and water supply. What is electricity, gas and water supply? Number 2. Then you have mining and quarrying. So let us see where is mining and quarrying. 2. And then you have construction. 9. Right. So what is the total percentage? 27. Very nice. 27. See guys, here numbers are not important. So you can anyway calculate if you learn it well. So 27. And what is the contribution of services? Total should be 100. Right? So you already got 17 plus 27, which is 44. So how much is there left for services? 56. 56, right? This is how you look at this pie chart like this, which is given in the documents, which is available along with the budget. So this document is available along with, see, along with the budget speech of the finance minister. There are multiple documents available. So from those documents, you can select these kind of pictures, pie charts, which will give you an idea that how to calculate. This calculation was not possible if you don't refer to this type of table, which is given in the budget. This is from economic survey and budget. So see, latest figures are given. FY26 is given. So if you don't have this kind of table, how will you learn what is the definition of agriculture, allied, industry and services? How will you know what are the components? Once you know the component, then it is super easy to find out this kind of pie chart we can take, because it makes our life easy and we can find out what is the contribution of various sectors. Simple, cool. Now, let us look at another one. So have a look at this, please. This is your page number 2 of today's handout. Handout number 2, page number 2. Chalo, let us do the exercise again. And bacho, mind you, the focus of today's session is to simplify the budget numbers, data and trend so that we can apply it for the exam. So what will you remember for UPSC purposes? For UPSC purposes, if you are given this kind of data, okay, it's very simple pie chart. What do you need to pick from there? You are supposed to pick the proper sectors which are given, like agriculture, allied activities, contribution 17%. How do you find the contribution of industries? You need to know the 4 subsectors, add them, that will give you the contribution. And this broad trend should be there in your mind. I want to ask you one question. If you look at a developing country, what will you find in a typical developing country? That the contribution of agriculture in GVA will be high, or contribution of industries or contribution of services. Whose contribution is going to be very high in a developing country? Answer is contribution of agriculture. In a typical developing country, the contribution of agriculture will be very high. But since India is entering the middle income, what will you find? In a middle income country, we are moving away from agriculture towards industry and services. So the contribution of agriculture will come down and the contribution of industry and services will go up, as it is visible here. This is the trend which is typically seen in a developing country, right? Acha, what does Lewis model tell us? Lewis model tells us that a country progresses from agriculture to industries. But in India, follow Lewis model, typical Lewis model, no. We moved from agriculture to services. So contribution of service is very high. Now, this was one part. Let's look at part number 2. Ye to theek hai, this is fine. But we are also interested in knowing that which sector is growing very fast. We are also interested in knowing the rate of growth. So let us see the rate of growth. Again, I am referring to economic survey and budget document for this year. Right, so look carefully. See this, please. So here, you are going to get 2 things. Number 1 is the figure for 24-25, right? The provisional estimates, which means whatever the government of India estimated in 24-25, they made some corrections in that when they got the final data, and that data is available with us. And what is this FAE? FAE means first advance estimate, which means that government has estimated what will happen in future. So let us look at 2024-25, 25-26. Let us compare. So 25-26 means the year, last year. For that, the government of India has given the first advance estimate, which means they had thought about some data last year, but Finally, when the year was over, the government of India refined the data. So this is the first advanced estimate, which means this is the first estimate after the first layer of refinement, which is available to us, 25-26. Okay, this is the first one. So which means that we can go with this data for now. Next year, what will the government do? After a few months, this first advanced estimate will be converted into a final figure for us. But currently, final figure is not available. This is the first advanced estimate. So let us see. So this is provisional and this is first advanced estimate. So, bacho, let us focus on this. So this is agriculture, mining and quarrying, manufacturing, electricity, gas, construction, trade, hotel, finance and public administration. ध्यान से देखिए बच्चों, see this carefully. So you can clearly see this is rate of growth, which means at what pace or at what speed is various sector of the economy growing. So for example, if you see carefully, ध्यान से देखिए, if you see carefully, what is the rate of growth of agriculture sector? So in 2024-25, it was 4.6%. And if you see in 25-26, the first advanced estimate, you will see 3.1%. अच्छे से देखो, please see this carefully, बच्चों. So 4.6% and 3.1%. So what has happened to agriculture and allied activities? The growth has reduced. So what are we going to fill here? यहाँ पे we will write rate of growth as 3.1%. This table is given in your handout. You please fill this table. 3.1%. Now you can see that for industry, what are we going to take? For industry, we have to take this mining and quarrying, manufacturing, electricity, gas, and construction. We have to add all this, right? We have to add all this. So if you add, you cannot do a simple addition. We'll have to do a weighted average based on the importance of this sector, right? You cannot simply add this. So if you want to see what is the contribution of industries, because this figure is not available here, this is the component wise it is given, but overall it is not given. So simple addition will not help us because different sectors have different importance. So weighted average has to be taken. For that, we need another table. This table, ये देखिए, this is the table that we require for that purpose. So if you see carefully, यहाँ पे देखिए, if you look at industries, so what is the contribution of industries? 6.2%. What is the rate of growth of industries? 6.2%. And what was the rate of growth of industries last year? It was 5.9. Abhi it has become 6.2. This is from budget document only this year. So government is saying that rate of growth of industries is going up. और यहाँ पे देखो agriculture का rate of growth is coming down. So which number are we going to pick from here? 6.2, right? So we are going to write 6.2 for industries. Now for services, again, there are so many components. We can't take simple average. We'll have to take weighted average. So that figure is already given in the budget, which is 9.1. So which means we have to write here 9.1. So these are the three things that we must be knowing for prelims. So for prelims, we should know which sector is growing at what pace. So agriculture is growing at roughly around 3%. Industries are growing at, roughly around 6.2%, and services are growing at 9.1%, which means the growth of service sector is the highest, followed by industries, followed by agriculture. This type of questions are asked in UPSC prelims, right? And we should be ready for that. That's number one. Okay. Now, please come to this part. Look carefully. This is given on your handout. In the new handout, it is given on page number 2. Today's handout, this is page number 2. Okay. So what are we going to do? We are going to take out some numbers from the budget and we are going to interpret them for exam purposes and we are going to use them. Okay, since this lecture is for UPSC, so I'm going to pick up the numbers from the budget and I'm going to tell you how to play with them. Right? You don't have to get into the derivation, etc. You simply have to understand that what are the various numbers given, how to use them, what is the meaning of this, what is the interpretation. Derivations and all not in your syllabus. If you're doing optional, maybe you can, but for a GS class, you don't need to. So let's come back. So now let us look carefully at this. देखिए ध्यान से, what is mentioned here? This is very crucial result which is given in the budget of this year, from where you have to get some results. देखिए. So this says average over FY16 to FY20. What is the meaning of FY16, FY20? The meaning of FY16 is 2015 to 2019. This is the meaning. Okay. And what is the meaning of FY25? 2024. And what is the meaning of FY26? 2025. So do you have to memorize these numbers? Of course not. What do you have to understand? I'm going to give you dictation for that. But first, let me explain. I'll give you the dictation. So see, what is the meaning of this? The meaning of this is, if you look at the average rate of growth between 2015 to 19, what is so special about 2015 to 19? 2015 to 19 means we are talking about 5 years before COVID, which means the government of India in this year's budget is talking about pre-COVID and post-COVID. So what have we done here? In the pre-COVID 5 years, which means 2015 to 19, we are talking about this pre-COVID 5 years. On an average, the agricultural growth rate, what was the rate of growth of agriculture? 4.5%. So here it is 4.5%. Now in the budget it is mentioned that in 2024-25, see bacho, 2024-25, this 4.5 became 4.6, matlab it increased, and now it has become 3.1. So what is the government mentioning in this year's budget? The government is mentioning that whatever was the average before COVID, Indian economy was able to achieve that particular average. In fact, we did better than that average, which means after COVID, India actually literally bounced back in terms of agriculture. That is the message here. But then the government is saying that finally what has happened last year is that agriculture rate of growth came to 3.1%. So it came down, which means there is some problem in the field of agriculture. There is a stress. So what are the problems in the field of agriculture? Typical problems in India: dependence on monsoon. That's number one. Hardly 55 to 56% of India's cultivable land is under assured irrigation. So that's one of the problem. Even today, monsoon dependence is very high. Number two, so what has happened is, this is a typical problem of Indian agriculture, that the investment by private sector in the Indian agriculture is even today very low. And the investment of government in the agriculture is decent, but the investment of private sector in our agriculture is even today very low. Third is our productivity has become stagnant. Plus, you understand climate change. Yes, because of that, what has happened is the productivity has also been impacted. So we need new variety of seeds, right? We need to follow crop rotation. That is also one of the important things. And you understand that roughly 89.4% of India's farmers are small and marginal farmers, which means if you go to small and marginal farmer, their plot size is small, less than 2 hectares. And what happens because of that? As the population grows, fragmentation of land happens, small size of the plot, fragmentation happens, so productivity is not very high. You cannot even introduce big machines there, which means we need to design customized machines and instruments. That is also very important. So overall, agriculture reforms are required. Yes, modern methods. Number two, look at the industrial sector. If you look at the average growth rate of industries in the pre-COVID phase, it's 5.4%. What happened after COVID? So after COVID in the year 2024-25, the rate of growth of industries became 5.9. And finally, last year it became 6.2. So what is the government saying? Government is saying that in the post-COVID world, which is today, the average rate of growth of industries this year, 2025 and 2024, was higher than what we observed before COVID. So government is trying to compare that where were we before COVID and where have we reached now. So where have we reached now? We have reached at a position where the average rate of growth of industries today is higher than pre-COVID phase. That is the message government wants to give. Right? Now look at the services. In the pre-COVID days, the average rate of growth of service sector was 7.6%. To 2024, it was 7.2%. Last year, it's 9.1%, which means service sector again is the savior of the Indian economy. And our rate of growth of GVA, gross value added, is high. One of the reasons being services. And what about industries? Absolutely. Industries have also in last 2 years become slightly stabilized. Right? So this is crucial here to understand. So, आप क्या लिखोगे? What will you write here in the form of dictations? So, लिखिए, please write some facts related to agriculture, industry, and services. So, dictation number 1 under this section. Some facts related to agriculture, industry, and services. Dictation number 1. Please write that in terms of growth rate, the rate of growth of agriculture in 2025 has declined compared to 2024. That's statement number one. Statement number two, the rate of growth of agriculture in 2025 is lower compared to the 5 years average rate of growth before COVID. So average rate of growth before COVID 4.5, currently is 3.1. What will you write for industries? The average rate of growth of industries in 2025 is higher than 2024. Next statement. The average rate of growth of industries in 2025 is higher than the average rate of growth of industries in the 5 years prior to COVID. So 5 years prior to COVID, whatever was our rate of growth in industries, we are doing better than that. And what about this? About services. So the first point of services, the average rate of growth of services in 2025, you know how to write it. I'll tell you. ऐसे लिखो आप. Average ROG. Write like this. Average ROG. So average rate of growth of services. How to write services? You can write like this. So average ROG of services, rate of growth of services in 2025 is higher than 2024. And next point, the average ROG of services in 2025 is greater than the average ROG of services in the 5 years prior to COVID. Prior to COVID. You can write this. Okay? So this is your statement which can be asked in prelims. And as I told you, that the whole purpose of the session today is to make you ready for the prelims and the mains exam, as well as equip you with the right knowledge so that you can use this information for your interviews as well. So these are the dictations that you are supposed to write. These statements, statement number 1, 2, 3, 4 karke. So you have to write. Now, let's go to our handout. In the handout, bacho, page number 2 of today's handout. Look at page number 2 of today's handout. Isko अच्छे से देखिए. See what is there. There is a table that I have given you, incomplete table. Usko you will have to fill. So what is there in the table? You can clearly see that I've given this table which says agriculture, industry and services rate of growth. Rate of growth. So did you write this? Did you fill this table? Rate of growth, agriculture 3.1%, industry 6.2 and services 9.1. Did you write this? Okay. What will you write in the trend? Super easy. We have already seen it. So what will you write in the trend part? For agriculture, what will you write? Decline. So just below the trend, please write decline. In front of agriculture, decline. What will you write in front of industries? Increased. So the trend is increase. And what will you write in front of services? The trend is increase. Increasing or decreasing, that is what you have to mention. So are you learning what to write for, for your UPSC prelims? This will help you in prelims. And prelims is very close. See, bacho, we have to prepare the budget in such a way that before prelims, we just need to open this handout or small notes that I'm giving you, just revise them, you'll be okay. And as I told you in yesterday's session as well, that the notes that you prepare for UPSC prelims or mains should not be bulky at all. Okay? We should not do that. So this is it. Now look at the gross value added, GVA. Look at the overall performance of the economy. So what is our gross value added? 2025, 7.3%. What was there in 2024? 6.4. So what have we done? We have improved. What was the average gross value added 5 years prior to COVID? 6.4%. And prior to COVID, it was 6.4%. So what have you got to write from here? So please write. Yes, please write that in terms of overall performance, लिखिए बच्चों, in terms of overall performance, the GVA of Indian economy, in terms of overall performance, the GVA of Indian economy in 2025 is higher than 2024. Is higher than 2024. And next statement, the GVA in 2025 is also greater than the average GVA of Indian economy 5 years prior to COVID. 5 years prior to COVID. So, Bacho, I want to ask you one statement. Let me see if you can answer this statement or not. And for those of you who have just joined, very good evening and welcome back to the session on budget. So, guys, please tell me one answer statement. There is one statement for you. Please tell me the answer in yes or no. So, the statement is, can we claim that India has been largely able to surpass its average GVA in the post-COVID world compared to pre-COVID? कह सकते हैं? Can we say this? Yeah, we can. Statement number 2. Can we say that it purely in terms of GVA, performance of India's GVA in 2024 and 25, these 2 years, can we say that India has almost recovered the GVA shock that it got during COVID? Can we say that recovery has happened in the GVA shock? Yes, we can. These type of qualitative statements can be asked in UPSC. That has India been able to recover from the GVA shock that we got during COVID? Yes, we have. And they can also ask you that, is it true for India that India has been able to surpass its average GVA in the post-COVID world compared to pre-COVID? Of course, yes. Correct. Good. So these are some of the statements that you can find in UPSC prelims. Now, so Bacho, as I told you that today's session is all about taking some numbers, trying to simplify them, convert those difficult numbers or typical numbers into some qualitative statements, understand them and use them in the exam. So in UPSC, it is not necessary that UPSC will ask you that what was the rate of growth of services, 9.1%, not necessary, but UPSC will definitely ask you that the service sector performance in terms of rate of growth has improved in 25 compared to 24. This type of statement they can ask. And UPSC has been, playing with a lot of qualitative statements these days. So it's not necessary to memorize entire data, but yes, it is important to understand the trend. But you cannot understand the trend without data. So that is why I gave you the data, not because I want you to memorize it. I gave you the data so that from there you can extract the right trend, which we have done in the class. So now, Bacho, there is one more task that is there in front of you. What you have to do is, you have to open this one simple thing, which is this table. In fact, this bar graph, it's not a table, it's a bar graph. So, which is given on page number 3, third page of your handout, today's handout, page number 3. Aap dekho, there is something which is very interesting, which is given here. So you can see that I have given you some data related to private consumption and investment. So this is from this year's budget. So what does the budget say? Budget says that private consumption and investment are drivers of India's growth. So what is the budget saying? That Indian economy is mainly growing because of private consumption and because of investment. These two things. ये कहना क्या चाहते हैं? What does the budget want to say? So I'll give you a simple equation and then we are going to examine, and I suggest that you open your notebook and you start to write. You can write in your handout also. I have left some space there. If you want, you can write in handout number 2. If you want, you can write in your notebook also. So chalo, let us bacho write one classic equation from your macroeconomics. So what is the classic equation from macroeconomics? Your output is equal to C plus G plus I plus NX. This is our classic equation. Okay, we have to understand it in a different way. I told you know that we have to convert our budget document into UPSC kind of content. So the treatment is thoda different, slightly different. So now look carefully, bacho. What is the meaning of this? This is our output or GDP, whatever you want to call it as. What is this? This is private final consumption expenditure. What is G? G is government final consumption expenditure. What is this I? Investment, gross fixed capital formation. And what is NX? Export minus import. Export minus import. Now, my first question to you, what is the meaning of private final consumption expenditure? From NCERT's NCERT macro, you will easily find the definition. So what is the meaning of private final consumption expenditure? Somebody please tell me the meaning, private final consumption expenditure, and also please tell me, you can type it in your chat box. Please type the meaning of private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, as well as the gross fixed capital formation. Please type the components. Let us quickly revise. Very good. So, very nice. One of you have mentioned the component of private final consumption expenditure means household consumption, correct? But it's not only household consumption, there is one more component. Is consumption by household plus non-profit institutions also. Household plus non-profit institutions, both. And what is the component of, what is the meaning of government final consumption expenditure? Where does the government spend the money? The government spends the money in purchasing goods and services, paying salaries, right? Plus pensions, plus capital expenditure. So total expenditure of the government, which is revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure. Very nice. Good answer. One of you wrote it. In fact, many of you are writing. Very good answer. Correct. So all the expenditure by the government is mentioned here. What is this gross fixed capital formation? Gross fixed capital formation means, what are the components of gross fixed capital formation? If you read NCERT macro, you'll find it. Somebody please give the answer. Gross fixed capital formation. I'm waiting for the answer. Amount invested is correct, but what are the components? Gross fixed capital formation. Components, please. See, gross fixed capital formation, you can call as investment also, capital formation also. But what are the components? Okay, I'll tell you the components. Components, please. Okay, I'll tell you the components. Gross fixed capital formation ka the components are, see, this is also called as investment or gross fixed capital formation, right? So what are the components? Absolutely. So finally, Rahul, you have given the answer. Kriti, you have given the answer. Okay, I'll tell you. So the first component is that whenever we manufacture or we invest in equipments and machines, right? Machines, equipments, that's component number 1. Number 2, when we do construction of residential buildings or official buildings for commercial purposes or residence purposes. So infrastructure or we can call it construction. Yes. So first is machines, equipments. Yes, they are called assets. And the second is the buildings that you make, that is also asset. And the third is change in inventory, change in stock, right? Absolutely. And the fourth one is called change in valuables. These are the 4 components of gross fixed capital formation. Yes, Dhiman, absolutely correct. Change in inventory and change in valuables. So these are the 4 components here. Yahan pe how many components are there? Household plus non-profit organizations. And what is this? Revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure. These are the 2 components. And what are the components here? Machines and equipments, construction activities, change in inventory, and change in valuables. These are the components, right? This is quick revision. Yes. So one of your friend is saying nostalgia class 12th. Absolutely. And UPSC will not leave you. They will help. They'll make you revise standard 12th also. From 12th to your post-graduation days, whatever is relevant, UPSC will make you study that. That's the beauty of the exam. All right. So these are the components. Ab dhyan se dekho bachcho. I want to ask you a question. Simple question. Now see. You see all these things. If you look at expenditure method, if you add all these things, no. So yeah, if you add all these things, you will get the output of the country. Output as in a very simple way, you can call it as GDP in a very layman term. So now we are interested in knowing that why is the output or the GDP of this country increasing? Who is contributing? Like who is contributing maximum to it? So bacho, I will start with the last one only. So can you please tell me that what is export minus import for India? Does India export more or import more? India imports more, of course. So mostly you will see that if export is 30, import will be more than that. Import will be 35. This is true for India. So the last one is export minus import. You will always see that export is more than export is less than import. Import is always higher, which means ye last term na is mostly negative for India. Yeah. So so let us do one thing. So here, if you see carefully, look carefully, bacho. So what is the contribution of private final consumption expenditure in our total output? We are interested in knowing. And what is the contribution of government final consumption expenditure? And what is the contribution of investment, gross fixed capital formation? Right? We are interested in knowing what is the contribution of these things. Chalo dekhte hain. So let us see in our current budget, what is the contribution mentioned? See carefully, bachcho. यहाँ पे देखिए, this is private consumption, which means private final consumption expenditure. Yeah, private final consumption expenditure. So what is the contribution of private final consumption expenditure? 61.5. And what was the contribution of private consumption in 2024? 61.4. So what has happened between 2024 and 2025? Between 24 and 25, the private consumption has actually increased. So we as a society and economy have started to consume more. Would you attribute this to two facts, that the government of India last year reduced the GST on some of the important items of consumption? Would you say that it played a big role there? Number one. Number two, the RBI is also following expansionary monetary policy. So the repo rate and the rate of interest is also low. So can we say that people are taking more loans and people are spending that money in buying more consumption items? Yeah, we are. Of course, yes. And we are a young economy, aspirational economy, so we spend a lot of money. Absolutely. So what is the role of consumption? Consumption has increased. So what is the percentage? 61.5. So hum bol sakte hain, we can say this clearly, that this figure is roughly 61.5%. So if this is 100, the contribution of C is roughly 61.5. You should also note it down. Yeah. Now, look at the investment part. Gross fixed capital formation. Yeah. So what is this? As you can see, yeah, it is all in percentage of GDP. But all the figures we are using is in percentage of GDP. All the figures, in fact, which is mentioned in the budget, 99% of them are as a percentage of GDP. Today, I'll teach you some figures other than that also, but mostly it is percentage of GDP. If I say nothing, by default, it is like that. So you can see what is the contribution of private investment, 30. Earlier, it was 29.9. So can we say here, this is 30%? Right? So this has also increased. This has also increased. And what is the contribution of government consumption? The contribution of government consumption is currently 9.9. If you add this, it will be more than 100. Yeah, it will be more than 100. But total cannot be more than 100. So which means that our last item, net export, is negative. And you know it is negative because it is export minus import. Import is higher, export is lower. So whatever is the extra amount, if you do it there, yes, net import is a drag on India. Absolutely correct statement. It's negative part. So what has happened here? This 9.9 government You know what was the government's contribution in our output in 2024? 10. It was 10%. Now it has become 9.9. So it is slightly less. From 10, it has become 9.9. But majorly, we will say in a macroeconomic sense that it has also remained almost in the range. It has not become too low. Earlier it was 10, now it is 9.9. So not very low, it is okay, manageable. Yeah, reduced, of course. Technically, it is reduced. But in the overall sense, we'll say that government has largely been able to maintain it. And you understand that government's expenditure is directly proportional to its tax and non-tax revenue. And as per the budget, the government has said that they suffered a big loss of GST revenue when they reduced the GST on quite a lot of things. Yeah, and government also had to, yeah, that actually played a role. So if you look at these figures, अच्छे से देखिए. So as I told you that today we are more interested in knowing the numbers and their interpretations. In the next session, I'll tell you the reasons and the stories behind all these things. But today we are interested in knowing the numbers, their interpretations, so that we can easily find out that where India is going. So what is this showing to us? Very correct, very correct. One of you who attended the session yesterday, so Chanchal is saying that, this is interesting. The reason being, and you are right, absolutely correct. So your online friend is saying that this shows that relatively we are stable. This is the first thing that your friend is saying online, which is absolutely correct, that we have been able to maintain our stability of output. Correct, number one. Number two, Shubham is saying that what has happened is consumption and investment, they are leading the growth, which is also correct. बहुत सही, absolutely correct. Ruchika is saying that it is a Goldilocks kind of situation where things don't look too bad. Absolutely. Renu is saying that it is majorly consumption led. You are also correct. Absolutely. So, which means that most of you, your interpretation is absolutely correct. So, what kind of questions would be asked in the prelims? And let me tell you this, that you are absolutely on target, and I'm really happy to see this. The reason being, you are applying yesterday's knowledge in today's interpretation. Really happy to see. If you can apply your knowledge like this, 100% you'll do well in the exam. So what is the first positive thing that you guys said? Chalo isko likhte hain. We should write this. And then I will tell you a few things. So pehle isko likh lena chahiye. We should write this. What is the first thing that you should write? The first thing you should write is that India is a consumption-led economy. This is the first thing that you should write. Consumption-led economy. Number two, Indian growth is majorly driven by private consumption and investment. This is number two. Correct, Amia, absolutely correct. And number three, the government expenditure has also been majorly stable. Majorly stable. Right? These are the statements that we need to write. Majorly stable. Now, I want to show something interesting to you because you guys are going to be future policymakers. So you should be knowing something interesting. ध्यान से देखिए बच्चों. I'll show you. See. For the next statement, let me point out something dangerous for you. So look at this. Something really which India needs to worry about. India needs to be careful. Look at the investment pattern in India. So look at the contribution of investment in the growth of India or the output of India. Look carefully. So, bacho, if you start looking from 2015 till now, see the pattern. Do you get any particular trend here? No. You see that inconsistency with the performance of the overall global economy and Indian economy, overall performance of the economy, there is a change in the investment's contribution. It is not consistent. And in fact, yeah, it's a mixed trend. But I can show you something which India needs to be a little careful. Yahan se dekhiye, see this carefully. So if you look at the year 2022, immediately after COVID, see the numbers. Yes, there is a mild increase from 29.9 to 30, but I would majorly call it as a declining trend, in fact. If you look at 1 to 1, then you will see that ठीक है 0.1% increase. But if I'm looking at last 5 years, like, or last 4 years, in fact, then I'll see that there's a problem, which means our investment is on the declining trend overall. So if India wants to sustain its growth, it has been told by Monetary Policy Committee also, it has been told by the Finance Minister also, that India needs to make sure that investment keeps on rising. Because if investment does not increase, we are in trouble. Because government cannot all the time invest a lot. There is a limit up to which they will do it. So if we have to make sure that India is growing, investment has to be pushed. And how do you push investment? You push investment through ease of doing business, through reforms like labor reforms, taxation reforms. Regulations need to be simplified. Political stability is required, and infrastructure needs to be developed. Then only we are going to invite investors. We will see in the next session, tomorrow's session, about all these details. But today, as I told you, that this session is all about understanding the numbers and their interpretations. So what is happening? This investment is declining because of both global trend as well as because of few things that the industries expect from India. What do they expect from India? Good infrastructure, good governance, stability. These are the things they expect. So this is very crucial that we should increase it. Now look at the consumption expenditure by the Indian public. If you look at the consumption expenditure by the Indian public, यहाँ पे देखिए, see, at least we have been able to be above 60. So the contribution of private consumption in India's GDP is consistently above 60, which means who is driving India's growth? You and I are actually driving India's growth. And on a lighter note, the government of India should take care of us, the public, because it is public-led growth, the private consumption-led growth. Yeah. So who is leading the growth? The public. That is why ease of living, taxation reform, unnecessary burden of taxation should not be there. Opportunities for everyone. Right. This is what needs to be there, which means the Indian public has been really pulling up the growth. So these are the things that we take away from here. All right. Cool. Now, let's come to this part. Where will you find this? You will find this in yesterday's handout. You'll find this picture which I'm showing you in yesterday's handout. So in yesterday's handout, I have given you some numbers. Usko karte hai. Let us try to understand what these numbers are. So bachcho, you need to keep your handouts ready, your pen, your calculator, everything ready. And you need to keep your notebook ready. On page number 4, it is there. Great. So yesterday's handout, page number 4, as your friend says. Chalo, let us see what these things are. And I repeat again that this lecture is strictly meant for UPSC. So what are we going to do? We are going to convert the budget in such a way that we can use this to answer questions in the exam. We will not pass any value judgment. We are not here to support or oppose anyone. We are here to pick the right numbers, try to understand what is there in the budget, qualify the exam with good marks. That is the whole idea. Now see this carefully. That a budget has two sides, revenue and capital. Look carefully. A budget has two sides, two parts. One is revenue and one is capital. What is the meaning of revenue? Revenue means recurring sources of government income, and revenue expenditure means these are the recurring expenditures. So this revenue receipt and revenue expenditure, it does not lead to change in the government's position of asset and liability. That is the meaning. So government's position of asset and liability will not change because of this. But what is the meaning of capital receipts and capital expenditure? Capital receipt and capital expenditure actually bring changes in the government's asset and liability position. So these are basics. So what I have done is I have given you some numbers. Usko karte hain, fir let us see what these numbers are. Look carefully, bacho. It's there in your handout. So for example, if you look at the revenue receipt of India, RR means revenue receipt. Right. So what are the two types of revenue receipt? The two types of revenue receipt is, how does the government of India get its revenue receipt? Regular sources, tax revenue and non-tax revenue. Right. So two ways in which the government gets The revenue receipt is tax and non-tax. So revenue receipt is 35.3 lakh crore. Look at the figure, guys. It's rupees 35.3 lakh crores. Now, look at the expenditure. What is the revenue expenditure? 41.2 lakh crore. Dekho, if you see the actual numbers, it is not 41.2. You will find it to be 41.26, 41.27, aisa kuch. But we are simplifying it. We are taking round figures for ease of calculation. And frankly speaking, you don't have to memorize these figures. But why did I take the real figures? Because through real figures, you will see the magnitude also. And at the end, you will be able to apply the concept also. But do you need to memorize this? Absolutely no. It is only for reference. So what is the revenue expenditure? 41.2 lakh crore. Similarly, what is the capital receipt? Capital receipt of India, 18.1 lakh crore. Again, I have taken this from the budget, 18.1 lakh crore. If you take at the capital expenditure, which is called capex, it is 12.2 lakh crores. Okay, 12.2 lakh crores. Now, don't look at these components, Abhi. We'll see the components later on. But first, look at this, that what is the revenue receipt, RR, what is the revenue expenditure, what is the capital receipt, and what is the capital expenditure. Done? Cool. Now, look at this part, which is called interest payment. So what is the interest payment that the government has to do this year? 14.3 lakh crore, 14.03 lakh crore. Okay, this is the interest payment. These are real figures. I have just rounded them off. What is the value of the important subsidies that the government of India is going to give? 4.1 lakh crore. These are the important subsidies, not all, but important. Now, what is the grant in aid that the center is going to give to the state? 5.7 lakh crore. This is the grant in aid which the center is going to give to the state. Now, out of this 5.7 lakh crore, rupees 4.9 lakh crore is the amount which the center is giving to the state. So this is the grant in aid from center to state. Out of this 4.9 lakh crore, the state government is going to use for creation of assets. Which means 4.9 lakh crore is the money, is the amount which the state government is going to spend to create assets, for asset generation. So out of 5.7, 4.9 to be used for assets. Now you have the numbers. So now, bacho, I suggest that you take out your pen and paper, or if you have the handout, great. You start calculating these numbers, please. So please write the formula and calculate your numbers. And once you are done, you please mention it in the comment so that I will show you the calculation and the result. So please do this calculation. These are basics. Karte hain fir isko? Let us do the calculation. So what is TR? Total receipts. And what is RD? Revenue deficit. What is FD? Fiscal deficit. What is T? Total expenditure. What is ERD? Effective revenue deficit. And what is PD? Primary deficit. So please tell the answer. Again, numbers are not important, but the formula, the concept, etc. is important. And if you take the real numbers, understanding improves. Yes, Keshav, all this will be done in your smart current affairs also. Done? Do it, guys, so that you can also match your answer with my answers, which I'll provide. Okay. Correct, Sachin? All right. So I think you have done. Now let me show you the calculations. Ye dekhiye. See these calculations. So what is the calculation like, bacho? The calculation is like this. This is the total revenue, total receipt of the government. So what is the total revenue, or what is the total receipt of the government? Revenue receipt plus capital receipt, which is 53.4. And what is the total expenditure? 53.4. Which means whatever government is spending, total expenditure, government is able to manage by receiving that amount. So which means that it is same. Now look at the revenue deficit. Revenue deficit is revenue expenditure minus revenue receipt. This is 5.9. Absolutely correct. Correct, Vinny, your answer is right. So it's 5.9. Vijay, your answer is also right. Now, what is effective revenue deficit? Revenue deficit minus that part of the grant which center gives to state, which is used for creating assets. So 5.9, this 5.9 minus 4.9, which is 1, approximately 1. All these answers that you are getting, bacho, is approximate figure, right? Now, what is the primary deficit? Primary deficit means fiscal deficit minus interest payment, which is 16.99 minus 14. Remember, it was 14.03, but we took 14, which is 2.9. So primary deficit around 2.9. Right? Now, let us see this. What is fiscal deficit? Let me ask you a question. What is the meaning of fiscal deficit? So, bacho, if you look at this, see, I want to specifically discuss what is the meaning of fiscal deficit so that I can take you from there to something really very interesting. So let's do some calculation. You please keep your pen and paper ready and let us do some calculation. So let us not focus on others. Rest is very easy. I know you will be able to understand. What is fiscal deficit? That is something which I am interested in knowing. So suppose, bacho, I am giving you this example. Suppose that Government of India has spent 100 rupees. And I try to understand the meaning of fiscal deficit. Government of India has actually spent 100 rupees. We ask a question to the government. See the interpretation, bacho. It's slightly different. And if you understand this, nuances of fiscal deficit and very fine point related to it, your understanding of a lot of things given in this year's budget will become easy. So please try to focus. We'll do the maths little later after 2 minutes. So what is fiscal deficit? First, I'm going to explain in terms of literature. So suppose that 100 rupees has been spent by Government of India. So what is this 100 rupees called as? This 100 rupees is called as total expenditure. Total expenditure. Now we are asking a question to Government of India, right? Government, out of this 100 rupees, how much is that part which is truly yours, which you do not have to return to anybody? It's yours and you don't have to return to anybody, which means it is your own source of revenue, which you don't owe to anybody else, right? So government says that out of this 100 rupees, there are two things which truly belongs to the government, which government does not have to return to anyone. So can you please tell me, which are those two things which the government does not have to return to anyone? Aap bata sakte ho? Can you please tell me that which are those two things? The first is, yahan pe dekhiye, see carefully. Which is the first thing which government does not have to return to anyone? Very good. One of you are saying that it is revenue receipt. Absolutely correct. So we will write revenue receipt. Very good. Number two, what is that thing which government does not have to return? Correct. One of you are saying disinvestment. Absolutely. But what is the name of that term? Yahan pe dekhiye, this is called capital receipt. What is the meaning of capital receipt, bacho? The meaning of capital receipt is, suppose Government of India has taken loan from somebody. So if you take a loan from somebody, that type of capital receipt is called as a debt creating capital receipt. But if the Government of India sells a company, right, or somebody returns the loan of the Government of India, right, so that is called as non-debt capital receipt. Debt means which you have to return, non-debt means it's yours. So if Government of India sells a company and gets the money, that is called non-debt. So which out of these two is the money which government does not have to return? Non-debt. So what are we going to add here? Non-debt capital receipt. Which means if Government of India is saying that my revenue receipt is 30 and government says my non-debt is 5. So if Government of India has spent 100 rupees, out of 100 rupees, the 35 rupees which the government spent, government does not have to return to anyone. Which means how much is the money which government has to return? So the money which the government has to return is called as fiscal deficit. So out of this, how much money the government has to return? 100 rupees government has spent. Out of 100, this is the money which government does not have to return, which means obviously government has to return the 65 rupees. So this 65 rupees is the fiscal deficit. So total expenditure minus revenue receipt plus non-debt capital receipt. And what is non-debt capital receipt? The capital which the government gets, which the government does not have to return. Right? For example, by selling companies, the money that the government gets, government does not have to return. So this is called as fiscal deficit. So what is fiscal deficit? We call fiscal deficit as borrowing. है ना? इसी को तो कहते हैं borrowing. We call this as borrowing. Because now the question will be asked to government that, bhai government, how did you spend this 65 rupees extra? Because in your pocket you had only 35, but you spent 100. How did you spend this? So bacho, can you give me the answer? How does the government get this 65 rupees? Who gave the money to the government of India? 65 rupees. From where did the government get it? Because budget answers that question. I will tell you. The first thing that the government did to return this money is government bonds. You know na, that government sells bonds in the market. Yeah, for example, 5-year bond, 20-year bond, 30-year bond. So when the government sells bonds in the market, that is called as market borrowings. And what has happened to the market borrowing in last 2-3 years? Our market borrowing has increased actually. So the first thing is government bonds, which is market borrowings. Number 2, the treasury bills. Right? Short-term borrowing. That is also done by Government of India. Yeah. So government bonds for long-term and short-term is treasury bills. What is the third thing which the government uses to get the money? Have you heard of national small saving certificates, which people normally buy to increase their savings? Yeah, you can, yes, Kisan Vikas Patra, national saving certificates. You can get this from post office also. So these are some of the instruments in which public invests. National saving certificate, Kisan Vikas Patra, and other such instruments. So Bacho, I want to ask you a question. Suppose you buy this piece of paper from the government of India called as, here, you buy this piece of paper from the government. You buy this piece of paper called as national saving certificates, and you are buying this from, let's say, post office, example, or Kisan Vikas Patra. And you are giving 100 rupees to the post office. What is the promise by the post office from where you bought this? That after 10 years, they will return this money from you. They will return this money to you with rate of interest. And what does the post office do with this money? This money goes to the government of India. Which account? What is the name of the account? It goes to some account of the government of India. So can you please tell me the name of the account? Is it a liability on the government? If you are buying a Kisan Vikas Patra or National Savings Certificate, no, it is called as public account liability. It is public account because the government is holding this money on the behalf of the public and government has to return this. So this is also one of the sources of financing the government's deficits. So here the government is having shortage of 65 rupees. So from where will the government get the money? First, bonds and treasury bill. And the third is, for example, public account of the government. So government will get it from its public account. And what is the other source of borrowing for the government? Does the government also borrow from external sources like World Bank, IMF, etc.? And from other countries? Yeah, we do. That is called as external borrowing. External borrowing. So do you want to know how much has the government borrowed from what source? I will show you. I've got the figures. See, check. So look at our deficit this year. 16.9. 16.9 lakh crore is our deficit. So as I told you that these are rounded figures. So let us see from where the government has borrowed. Again, rounded figures only. So roughly market borrowing is 11.73 lakh crore. Right? You should note this down, that in the fiscal deficit, the market borrowing is 11.73 lakh crore. You can write it as 11.7 also, 11.8 also. Right? What is the treasury bill, amount of treasury bill that the government sold? 1.3 lakh crore. And what are those public account entries? 3.8 lakh crores. And what is the external debt last year? 15,000 crore, which means 0.15 lakh crore. As I told you, these are roundabout figures, not perfect ones. So these are the ways in which the government has borrowed. So UPSC can ask you, they will not ask you these figures. They will ask you that which component is the highest contributor in the government borrowing. So it's market borrowings by selling bonds, long-term bonds. And if UPSC will tell you, arrange them in the order of decreasing magnitude, that which instrument contributes the maximum in the government borrowing. Answer is number 1, market borrowing. Number 2, this public account wala entry. Number 3 is treasury bills, and number 4 is external debt. These are the ways in which the government of India is borrowing. Now I want to ask you another question. Let me see if you can answer the question. So guys, if I give you this information that the government borrowing, for example, is 16.9 lakh crore. जैसे मैंने आपको बता दिया, I told you that government borrowing is 16.9 lakh crore. So government has said they will borrow this money. In, for example, in 2026, government is saying, I will borrow this money. This is my needs. So can you please tell me that whatever the government of India has said that they will borrow 16.9 lakh crore, do you really believe that government will borrow only that much? Or do you believe that it might be possible that some more money is required and government might end up borrowing little more? What do you feel will happen? Will the government borrow exactly this much? Matlab, whatever government has planned in the budget, is it possible that government will stick to it and it will neither increase, neither decrease? Will it always be a perfect number? Is it possible? It is not possible. So if some, COVID-like situation happened, government borrowed more money. Economic slowdown will happen, government will borrow more money. So something will definitely be borrowed. Which means, if you look at fiscal deficit, where the government has already predicted, I will borrow this. Is it going to be a perfect measure of government's borrowing, or will the government borrow, or sometimes it is also possible that government borrows little more, As one of your friend is saying, absolutely correct. So your friend is saying that there is something called as off-budget borrowing also. Absolutely. So for example, suppose my name is Steel Authority of India, Coal India Limited, BSNL. And after some time, when the budget is presented, after that, after 2-3 months, I feel as BSNL or Coal India Limited that I need to borrow some money from the market to run my company. I will borrow that money. But will that borrowing be reflected in the fiscal deficit? No, because fiscal deficit numbers don't include the extra budgetary borrowings, called as extra budgetary resources. That will not be reflected here. So it might be possible that government borrows money, and whenever the government borrows money, that is called debt. But it might not be reflected here in the fiscal deficit. Which means we can have two different figures, one fiscal deficit and one government debt. Which one do you feel is a good representative of overall burden on the government of India? The fiscal deficit or the debt? Which one is a better representative? Which shows you the actual figure that, oh, this is what has happened? The debt. So what has the government done from this year's budget? So the government of India is saying that in India, we always used to have fiscal deficit as the measure of fiscal prudence or fiscal strength of the government. So government always used to say, my fiscal deficit is very low, so I'm very strong. So in our fiscal policy, the fiscal deficit used to be called as fiscal anchor. What is the meaning of fiscal anchor? The meaning of fiscal anchor is, what is the meaning of anchor? Anchor means anything that gives us direction. So what gives the direction to Government of India's fiscal policy? So Government of India's fiscal policy was guided by fiscal deficit. So for example, this year the Government of India is saying, I will have this much of fiscal deficit. But from this year's budget, the Government of India is saying that fiscal deficit cannot be the guiding principle, because off-budget expenditures, off-budget resource raising, for example, the resources raised by the public sector enterprises are not reflected in that. So government has now started to say that our real measure of the government finances and the fiscal health of the government should be debt to GDP ratio. Debt to GDP ratio. And in short, it is called as DGR. Debt to GDP ratio. So earlier, what used to guide our fiscal policy? It is called fiscal anchor. The fiscal anchor in India was fiscal deficit. Now, what is the fiscal anchor of India? The fiscal anchor of India currently is debt to GDP ratio. Now, the question is why? Why the government of India thought to change the fiscal anchor? Reason number one. So, the government of India is saying that I want to change it because fiscal deficit shows short-term behavior and debt to GDP ratio shows long-term behavior. Number two, in debt to GDP, there is more flexibility with the government because government says I can, incorporate the extra budgetary resources also. But in fiscal deficit, that is not possible. Extra budgetary resources are not included in fiscal deficit. So the government says I have more flexibility. It is more long term, which means planning becomes easy for the government. So government says it's easy for me to plan. So if you look at the numbers this year, ye dekhiye. If you look at the trend of fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, primary deficit, effective revenue deficit, this is the trend in India. So what is the trend in India? So we can divide India into two parts. One is pre-COVID, one is post-COVID. And absolutely, Vijay, correct. One is pre-COVID, one is post-COVID. So in the pre-COVID, you will see that all our deficits were rising. And what has happened after the COVID? After the COVID, we are seeing majorly there is a declining trend. So do we need to memorize this fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, primary deficit? I would suggest that for prelims purposes, you please memorize the latest figures, which the government has planned for 26-27. The budgetary estimates, which means this is the estimate by government of India, that I think we should memorize 4.3, 1.5, 0.7 and 0.3. Which means it is declining. It's good for the country, right? Now, let us look at some other thing. This is called as debt to GDP ratio. So currently, what is the debt to GDP ratio of India? 55.6%. This is the debt to GDP ratio of India. And what is the target of the government of India? So the government is saying that by the year 2030, our debt to GDP ratio should be in the range 49 to 51%, which means 50 plus minus 1%. That is why, yes, that is why the government is saying that I'm planning to have the debt to GDP ratio of around 50%, which means government is going to reduce it. So what is the debt to GDP ratio of India look like? How does it look like? Ye dekhiye, bacho. So during COVID, see what has happened. Our debt to GDP ratio was rising. Now what is happening to our debt to GDP ratio? Over a period of time, it is coming down. So for example, in 25-26 revised estimate, which means the estimate which we have got after refinement, it says 56.1. And this year, the government is saying budgetary estimate that it is expected to be around 55.6. This is what the government is saying. Now I want to ask you a question. So can you please tell me that what are the components of government debt? Because we are looking at debt to GDP ratio. So please mention in the comment box that what are the components of government of India's debt? You know the components of fiscal deficit, bachcho, right? आप बता सकते हैं what are the components of fiscal deficit? How do you calculate fiscal deficit? Total expenditure minus revenue receipt plus non-debt capital receipt, right? But can you please tell me the components of government debt? What is government debt? Debt means overall what has government borrowed. No. I'm not asking about government expenditure, government debt. Absolutely. So, Swayam, I think you mentioned the right thing. Number two, Rahul, you have mentioned the right thing. Absolutely. Dhiman, perfect answer. 10 on 10. Okay, I'll tell you. So I'll borrow the points from Dhiman. Absolutely correct answer. So what are the components of government debt? So government debt is equal to number one, internal debt plus external debt. Yeah, by selling bonds, etc., and by taking loan from other countries, internal and external. What is this called as internal and external debt? This is the government of India's liability, right? Debt. Number two, public account liability. Remember National Savings Certificate, Kisan Vikas Patra and all, right? Public account liability. And number three, extra budgetary resources. These are the components. If you add these three things, this is as per the FRBM Act, amended FRBM Act. So this is the definition actually. Provident fund also, absolutely, absolutely, correct. So if you look at the PF, that is also part of public account. So these are the components which is called as debt. So bacho, from prelims perspective, you should know that what are the components of debt. And as I showed you, that the government of India is reducing from 56 to 55, and ultimate aim is to have 50, around 49 to 51, around 50. Okay? This is important. And what will you write in your notes? That government of India is trying to change its fiscal anchor, or not trying to, but they have already changed. The fiscal anchor has been changed from fiscal deficit to debt to GDP ratio. And I gave you the reasons also, and I showed you the components. That extra budgetary resources not a part of it. Planning becomes difficult for the government because fiscal deficit is a very rigid kind of number. But debt to GDP ratio gives more liberty to express the real borrowings of the government. Right? Good. Now, let's look at some of the important components of the budget. So, bacho, how do you study a budget? You study a budget like this. Here, dekhiye. A budget can be studied like this: revenue and capital. Right? Revenue and capital. How do you divide revenue? How do you divide capital? You divide them like this: revenue receipt, revenue expenditure, capital receipt, capital expenditure. Now we are going to have a discussion which is absolutely relevant for prelims. These type of questions are asked in prelims. So what are we going to do? First, we saw overall things. That what is the formula? How do we apply the formula? What is the trend? Yes, we saw. Now what are we going to see? We are going to see the details of revenue receipt, the revenue expenditure, capital receipt, and capital expenditure. And as I told you that we should not be bothered with numbers. What are we bothered with? The trend, the qualitative aspect. Like when I showed you the fiscal deficit, I told you that don't be obsessed with the numbers, but you should know that what type of borrowing dominates the government, which helps the government to fulfill its deficits. So how does the government maintain its fiscal deficit? The government maintains its fiscal deficit through maximum through market borrowings. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Jaydeep, it's center. If you add the state also, it will cross 80. Okay, so let us see. So now we are going to look at the components so that it helps us to answer questions in prelims. So dekho bacho, this is the first thing which I have got for you. Please keep your pen and paper ready so that I can show you that what points to pick from here and understand. Dekho, this is directly, I have taken a screenshot from this year's budget. These are the numbers, but I would suggest you to completely refrain from all this. This will not help. So we have to pick the right things from there. So which are the right things? मैं दिखाता हूँ आपको. This is directly from the budget itself. So see this. If you look at the budget document, you will find something like this. ऐसा कुछ मिलेगा आपको. You'll find it. What is this? It says revenue receipt. So in your notebook, I suggest बच्चों you give a title revenue receipt. आप दे दो जल्दी. You please write revenue receipt. RR. So let us write some pointers. ये देखो. So what will you write as the first point? Revenue receipt is equal to tax revenue plus non-tax revenue. TXR plus NTXR. Tax revenue plus non-tax revenue. Okay? That is the first thing we will write. Now, if you look at the total revenue receipt of India, so let us see what is the amount of tax revenue that the government got. So the amount of tax revenue that the government got is 28.6 lakh crore. Right, so this is roughly 28.6 lakh crore is the tax revenue, and what is the non-tax revenue? 6.67 lakh crores. So roughly around 28.67 here, 28.67, and what is the non-tax revenue? It is 6.67. Yahan se we have picked from here. So these are the two things that we'll pick. So can you please tell me through calculation that what is the revenue receipt of the government? Ye dekho, 28.7 plus 6.6. So what is the answer? Total, what is the revenue receipt of the government? Tax plus non-tax. It is 35.3. 35.3. 0.2, 0.3 will keep on changing. It's fine. Now, can you please tell me what is the percentage share? Bacho, listen to the question carefully. These things, this will not come in the exam. This part will come in the exam. So can you please tell me out of the total revenue receipt of the government, what is the percentage share of tax revenue? What is the percentage share of tax revenue? This is tax revenue. What is its percentage share in 35.3? What is the contribution of taxes in the revenue receipt of the government? Rahul, you are close. It's not 70, it's more than 70. Absolutely. Sachin, correct. It is roughly 81. Correct. One of you are writing 81.3, ab bhi sahi ho. But if you write the near about number, it's roughly around 81. Very good. And what is the contribution of non-tax? It is 19%. So even if you memorize 80:20, it is fine. Yes, Enu, correct. So this is like little more precise. Agar aap yaad karo na 80:20, that is also fine. I want to ask you a question. Suppose you are a paper setter. Would you ask these type of questions in the exam? 100% yes, you will. आप पूछोगे ये question because you want to know that what is the contribution of taxes. So that is why you should know this. Should you know these numbers? No, it is not required. If you know, great. If you don't, no problem. You should know this. Now let us go back. Now in this, यहाँ पे देखो बच्चों, what else can be asked here? This is tax revenue. So they can ask you this in the exam. Which are the important taxes and their trend? That did their contribution increase or did their contribution go down? Yeah. So what is tarah ke they will ask you questions. So look at this, please. See, and these are the notes that you should make. यहाँ पे देखो, see, this is corporation tax, taxes paid by the company. So what is the trend? Positive trend, which means the contribution of corporation tax actually has increased. So corporation tax ka collection has increased in India. So has the yeah, so has the collection through corporation tax increased? Yes. Has the collection through tax on income, matlab income tax increased? Yes, it has. Custom duties, yes. Union excise duties, yes. What has happened to GST? The collection of GST came down. Why? Did the government of India sacrifice some of the GST through GST 2.0? Yeah, they did. That is why the collection through GST came little down. So what are you supposed to write? You are not supposed to follow this table. That's why I have not given this, because it will confuse you and give you headache. So what are you supposed to write? You are supposed to write from this table that corporation tax, income tax, custom duties, excise duties. So their collection increased. There is only one thing whose collection did not increase out of the major taxes, that is GST. Right? So you just need to remember the trend. You don't need to see all this for revision purposes. Absolutely not. For revision purposes, the only thing you should know these two, plus, as I told you, the trend is everything else increased other than GST. These are the two things that you are supposed to know from here. There is another thing that you are supposed to know from here. वो कौन सी चीज है? It is this. See, this is again from budget. This part. So what is this number saying? Again, you should, yeah, correct. Again, you should write it in your notebook. Let's look at the gross tax revenue or the total tax collection of the government in proportion to GDP. So compared to GDP, let us look at the collection of taxes, the gross tax revenue of the government. So यहाँ पे देखो, something has happened in India. If you look at India, you will see that as our GDP is rising, so suppose that our GDP is 100 rupees. So if you put it in denominator, out of this 100 rupees, if you put it in the denominator 100 rupees, what is the proportion of gross tax revenue through tax collection, direct plus indirect taxes? So if you look at the direct plus indirect taxes, out of this 100 rupees, the contribution of direct and indirect taxes here is 11.2 rupees. Right, this year the government is expecting 11.2 rupees. Last year it was 11.4. Uske pehle it was 11.5. So what is happening to our tax to GDP ratio? Our tax to GDP ratio is coming down. And it's not a good thing. As our income increases, our tax collection should also increase. This question has already been asked in UPSC once, that if the tax to GDP ratio increases, does it mean that the government of India has more freedom to spend money in capital expenditure, in improving the infrastructure? This type of questions have been asked. In social sector expenditure, yes, but it is decreasing. which means the government of India needs to improve its tax base. Government of India needs to be a little careful with that. Now, look at the direct and indirect taxes. So, whose contribution is rising? यहाँ पे देखिए. So, if you look at direct taxes, see बच्चों, this is direct tax. So, if you look at the tax to GDP ratio, you will see that the direct tax is 6.9% of GDP. So, out of our GDP, the contribution of direct tax is 6.9 and indirect taxes 4.3. This is for 2026. Last year, what was the result? 2025, 6.8 direct taxes, 4.6 indirect. So, अगर आप trend देखोगे ना, if you see the trend, you will see the contribution of direct taxes is rising and the contribution of indirect taxes is coming little down. Yeah, in fact, the government of India also claims that, especially since the demonetization, the government of India is saying that after that there has been attitude change, and the government is also saying that because the government has introduced tax reforms, that is why the collection of direct taxes is improving faster compared to the indirect taxes, right? So the share of direct taxes improving and the share of indirect taxes are going down. So is it good for the economy, bad for the economy? When direct taxes are increasing, it is called as progression, which means the society is more progressive. Indirect taxes are considered to be regressive. So the government of India is saying that now we are becoming a little more progressive. So bacho, from your revenue receipt, these are the things that you are supposed to note down and understand. That what is the overall tax to GDP ratio, contribution of direct taxes, indirect taxes, are we becoming progressive or regressive? And we are also supposed to understand that what is the tax revenue and the non-tax revenue ka percentage. Okay? This is what we are supposed to understand from here. Now, let's look at the next part. This is revenue expenditure. See the revenue expenditure, bacho, please. This is there in your handout. You can clearly see. So, yeah. So, what is the revenue expenditure here? So, revenue expenditure 2026, which means this year we are expecting 41.3 lakh crore. And what are we seeing in revenue expenditure last year? 38.7, which means these are recurring, regular expenditures. And what are some of the items, heavy items of revenue expenditure? Ye dekho, please see the interest payment that we are making. 14.03, 14 lakh crore is our interest payment, very high. Look at petroleum, 12,000 crore, food subsidy, 2.2 lakh crore, fertilizer subsidy, 1.7 lakh crore, pensions, 2.96 lakh crore. So these are the things that can be asked in UPSC, that in our recurring expenditure, regular expenditure, what is the contribution of some major subsidies, they will ask. They will not ask you the numbers, but they will ask you the trend, that which subsidy dominates. So here you can clearly see that pension 2.96, if you compare fertilizer, food and petroleum, you will see that food subsidy is the highest, followed by fertilizer and then petroleum. These three can be asked. Now let's compare 2025 and 2026. This table I have deliberately given so that you can compare. So see the pension 2.77 to 2.96, fertilizer 1.68 lakh crore to 1.7. So not a huge increase, mild increase. Yeah, this is a significant increase. And look at this. This is food 2.03 to 2.2 and petroleum 0.1 to 0.12. And as your friend Sachin is saying that this shows a significant increase, rest we have been able to slightly maintain. So what is the government's plan now? The government has planned since last 2 years to bring fertilizer reforms, because a lot of urea and some fertilizers are taken by non-farmers also. So government is saying if we can plug that leakage, then this fertilizer subsidy that you see now, it will come down. This is one of the government of India's plan. Food subsidy, they are not trying to touch as of now. Other things they are. Like fertilizer, they are saying that they want to bring reforms here. It will really help India. Now, I know that you must be thinking, do you need to memorize this? Can I tell you the real answer? Yeah, you need to. I'll tell you why. Ye teen to you need to memorize. And the reason is, UPSC has already asked questions that discuss various subsidies by the government of India. Discuss India's subsidy programs. They have asked this question in GS paper 3. And they have also asked questions related to fertilizers of India. That what are the different type of fertilizers and what is the fertilizer pricing policy? These type of questions UPSC has already asked. Now imagine if you are getting a question on fertilizer, that what is the fertilizer policy of India? And there you are not writing that government of India is giving subsidy. See, farmers are also paying money in fertilizer, but government also gives subsidy. And if you are not writing the numbers that fertilizer subsidy given by the government is roughly around 1.7 lakh crore, that will not add value to your mains answer. So in your mains answer, you need to write this number. And you already seen in UPSC that food security and food subsidy related questions have already been asked in UPSC related to agriculture and food subsidy. There you need to give this number, which is 2.2 lakh crore. So we have to memorize some of these numbers like 2.96, 1.7, 2.2 and 0.12. These things have to be memorized, not for prelims, but at least for GS3 UPSC mains. And in prelims, they will just ask you which subsidy is the highest out of major subsidies. So do memorize these numbers, please, for UPSC prelims and mains. In prelims, they will not ask you this number, but in mains, definitely they will ask you. Right? So here, in terms of major subsidies, this is the pension, then food, then fertilizer, and then you have this. Aise karke they will ask you this question. Yeah. I suggest that you should only memorize 26, 27, the expected one for this year, because you know that these have not increased a lot. So you can say that more or less this year and last year it's in the same range, as you can say. So it will save your energy and time. It will reduce your burden. You can say in India it is around 1.7, for example, and you will get marks in the exam if you use the word around. Okay. So this is done. Now we come to capital receipts. So see, for capital receipts, I suggest that we follow this. This is a better data. So for capital receipt, if you see 2026, 27, 18.1, 25, 26, 16.2. Yeah. So for example, in capital receipt, we are seeing that there is a jump now. This is expected by the government that capital receipts will increase. Bas yaad kar lijiye, capital receipts 18.1, roughly around that. Now, look at this capital expenditure. This is important. Capital expenditure is important. So, bachcho, what are the 2-3 things that we need to understand in capital expenditure? So, capex by central government, that is the first thing we should know. Second, the grant in aid by central government to state government, which is used for assets. You know one figure, no? That central government gives money to the state government in the form of grants, and out of that grant, 4.9 lakh crore, remember I told you, that is being used for asset creation. Those things we have to understand. So, we have to understand that what is the capex by central government. This year it is expected 12.2 lakh crore. And we have seen that this figure is 4.9 lakh crore. If you add these two, it is called as effective capex. So what is the effective capex of India? So if you add this 12.2 and 4.9, it is 17.1 lakh crore. So if you see this data, you can clearly see that the effective capex is rising. Dekhe, 12.5, 13.2, 14 and 17.1. You can also see that here the capital expenditure by center is also rising. Now, the center gives money to the state, and the state is also using more money for asset creation. That is also rising. So what are you seeing? You are seeing that capex is rising, and the money that state government gets, which they use for asset, is also increasing. But state governments are also creating more assets. And in total, our capex, effective capex, is also rising. But you need to note down some numbers here in your handout or in your notebook. Aap aise likh lo. Look at the year 2019-20, which is pre-COVID. Just 1 year before COVID, what was India's effective capex? 5.2 lakh crore. This 5.2 lakh crore is 2.6% of GDP. Now, what is the current capex? The current capex is 4.4% of GDP. This is the effective capex. 17.1 lakh crore is what? 4.4% of GDP. That is the effective capex, 4.4%. Last year it was 3.9%. So now it has increased. It has become 4.4 from 3.9. And if you just look at the capex of center, it is 3.1% of GDP. Last year also it was roughly around same. Slightly increased, but more or less same. And if you look at the state, 4.9, it is 1.3% of GDP. Last year it was 0.9% of GDP. Which means out of GDP, if you see, the center is also spending more money in infrastructure construction and asset creation, the states are also putting slightly more money, which they are getting from center. So overall, if you look at the effective capex, it's 4.4% of GDP this year. It is expected. Last year it was 3.9, which means it is increasing. So what are the numbers that we have seen, bachcho, so far? Revenue expenditure, revenue receipt, capital expenditure, capital receipt. These are the details that we are supposed to do for UPSC. अब एक काम करते हैं. Let us do one thing. So there is this data which I have given here. No, you don't need to. Now you don't need to. You just need to memorize this 4.4. This you have to memorize. Dekho, here what do you need to memorize? I'll tell you. It will make your answer a good answer. You need to memorize this 4.4% of GDP, which is the effective capex. You need to memorize 3.9%. Yeah, 3.9%. That is also something which you have to memorize, these two. Then you have to memorize 17.1, which is the effective capex. You also have to memorize 14. ये सब you have to memorize. You also have to memorize 12.2 and 4.9. And you have to memorize last year also 11 and 3.1. Matlab this side you will have to memorize. Why do you need to memorize this side? You need to memorize this side because if you're writing a mains answer, there you will have to write that India has been able to increase its capex and effective capex. There you need to give these numbers. If you give this some of these numbers, no, your answer becomes very rich. Okay. Now let me show you the table which I created for you here. This is something special which I created for you. I'll tell you later on what this is. Yeah, but first you will have to do something. I'll tell you what you have to do. Dekho. Look at these numbers. These numbers you don't need to memorize. These numbers also don't need to memorize. I will give you a result from here which you have to use in your mains answer. And in prelims also they can ask you the question. So bacho, can you calculate something? You please take out your calculators and I'll tell you what to do with that. Dhyan se dekhiye. So for 2025-26 I have given you some data. For 26-27 I have given you some data. Okay? So for example, revenue receipt is 33.4 lakh crore, revenue expenditure, capital receipt, capital expenditure, effective capex. I have given you all this data. Here also effective capex given, revenue receipt, revenue expenditure, capital receipt, capital expenditure, everything given. Now, can you do one thing? Can you please calculate these ratios? ये आप कर सकते हो. Using this data, which is there in your handout, by the way. So can you please calculate 1, 2, 3 for 2025-26 and 26-27? You have to calculate a ratio, capital expenditure upon revenue expenditure into 100. ऐसे कर देना, multiplied by 100, multiplied by 100, multiplied by 100. So first is capital expenditure by revenue expenditure, capital expenditure by total expenditure, effective capital expenditure by total expenditure. Please calculate these ratios. You will get something really awesome. And you please calculate this for 2025-26 and also for 26-27. Yes, you are getting the right answer. So please calculate and tell me the values. Very good. And by the way, as you were asking what to memorize, you have to memorize effective capex. You have to memorize capital expenditure. That's it. You don't. If you use these two information, no, your mains marks will improve. If they ask you a question that, what is the type of expenditure of India? How much is the India spending in creation of assets? There you need to write these things. For GS paper 3 mains, you will get more marks. You got these values, right? Okay, I'll show you the values. Do you need to memorize these values? Absolutely no. I'll tell you the meaning of this. If you have calculated, can I show you the final answer? Check the answers. See if I have calculated it right. So these are the numbers. ऐसे कुछ, something like this. ठीक है, decimal here and there, but majorly you will get these kind of numbers. So now, see the first ratio. What is the first ratio? The first ratio says capital expenditure upon revenue expenditure. But I want to ask you a question. Which expenditure should rise faster? Capital or revenue? If the country wants to create more assets, capital? ठीक है. So if you calculate the ratio of capital expenditure upon revenue expenditure, so whatever is the revenue expenditure in relation to that, what is our capital expenditure? Right, that is what we are calculating. That in comparison to revenue, what is capital expenditure? So if you get this ratio as 28.4 and this ratio improves, if this ratio is improving, that means, yes, it should be higher. That means, are we spending more money in generation of assets, or are we spending more money in day-to-day recurring expenses? We are spending, yeah, we are spending slightly more money now at a good pace in capital. So this ratio should actually increase in the economy. And if this ratio increases, your capital expenditure upon revenue, if this ratio increases, that means that the economy is creating more assets, better for future productivity. Absolutely correct. It is called capacity building. And if capacity building happens, it also helps you in something else. It helps you to achieve your potential GDP. It helps you in potential GDP. And remember, in the first session of budget, I told you that the government of India must involve the community for capacity building. How do you involve the community? You involve the community by giving them more assets, more schools, hospitals, roads. This helps us to achieve our potential GDP, which has been asked in UPSC. Number 2, capital expenditure upon total expenditure. What should happen to this? As a proportion to total expenditure, what should happen to our capital expenditure? It should also increase. Is it increasing? Yes, it is increasing. Look at the third one. Effective capital expenditure upon total expenditure. Should it increase? Yeah, it should increase. Is it increasing? Yes, it is increasing. And these three ratios are improving. So what can you conclude from here? If these three ratios are improving, is economy going in the right direction or wrong direction in terms of expenditure? Going in the right direction. Aapko pata hai what are these three things called as? See, directly it is not given in the budget. I took these numbers from the budget and I thought that I will connect these numbers with the static areas. So what are these three things called as? There is a specific name. Ideally, it should have been given in the budget, but diya nahi hai. But you tell me, what is the name? The name of this concept? It is called as quality of expenditure, QOE. It is called as quality of expenditure. So in UPSC, if they ask you that how do you measure the quality of expenditure, there are three ratios. So the first ratio is called as capital expenditure to revenue expenditure. That should increase, which is increasing. Number 2, capital expenditure to total expenditure, improving. And third is effective capital expenditure or CAPEX upon total expenditure. That is also improving. So if any of these three things are given in the exam and they ask you that what can you conclude about quality of the expenditure, you should say it's improving. And in UPSC, if they give you these three options and ask you which of the following three shows the quality of expenditure, you should say all three of them. Right? Because if somebody gives you an option in the exam, suppose I give you a statement by saying that, expenditure of India is rising. Capital expenditure of India is rising as income of India is rising. Right? So if I give you this, that capital expenditure is, but revenue expenditure can also rise. In absolute terms, both can rise. So we are not interested in finding the absolute terms. We are interested in finding the quality of the expenditure by comparing two types of expenditure. That what is the capital expenditure compared to revenue expenditure. If you compare two variables, then we can say which one is becoming better. So that is why these three are standard ratios which are generally used to get the details of the quality of expenditure in relative terms. Now, So there is something more which I want you guys to calculate. See this please. Look carefully. ये तो अभी हमने करा है ना, we did this some time back. So this is the budget. What did we do? We did this bifurcation and we understood what is the revenue receipt, what is the revenue expenditure, this is capital receipt and this is capital expenditure. We did these 4 things. I gave you these numbers also, 35.3, blah, blah, all these numbers. And there I gave you a number that 18.1 is the capital receipt. And here non-debt creating receipt is 1.2 lakh crore. What is the meaning of non-debt? So this is the money which government received, which government does not have to return to anyone. For example, through disinvestment or privatization. If the government sells a company, it gets the money like that. So it's 1.2 lakh crore. Now, can you please tell me, this is the graph also, see this graph. This is given in your budget, by the way. So from budget only I got this number. So see what is given here. So first it is saying center's net tax revenue. तो कहाँ पे लिखा है tax revenue? This 28.7 is the tax revenue. ठीक है, lakh crores. What is the non-tax revenue? 6.7 lakh crores. 2 things given. What is the third one? Non-debt capital receipt is 1.2 lakh crore. So what are the numbers which are given in the budget? So actually this diagram is from budget only. So the budget says that tax revenue is 28.7 lakh crore, non-tax revenue 6.7 lakh crore, and the non-debt capital receipt is 1.2 lakh crore. These are the 3 figures given. Now, can you please calculate and tell me what is the non-debt capital receipt of India? Using this information, only this much information is given. You have to calculate and tell me what is the non-debt receipt of India, not capital, but non-debt receipt of India. So please tell me non-debt receipt. Please calculate non-debt receipt. Okay. So what is the formula of non-debt receipt, bachcho? Look at this. What is the formula of non-debt receipt? The meaning of non-debt receipt is the money which the government gets, which the government does not have to return. So which are the 3 components of the non-debt receipt? First is, see, tax revenue. The government does not have to return it to anybody. The second is non-tax revenue. Government does not have to return it to anybody. And the third is non-debt capital receipt, which the government does not have to return to anyone. You just have to add all this. Yeah. So this will be your non-debt receipt if you add all this, right? It's roughly around 36.6. Correct. Which means government does not have to return it. So what did you learn? You learned that if you get this kind of information from the budget and you have to calculate at how much is the money received by the government which the government does not have to return. So which is the money which the government does not have to return? Pehle to this money the government does not have to return. And then second is this part the government does not have to return. So what is this called as? Tax revenue plus non-tax revenue together is called as revenue receipt. इसी को तो कहते हैं ना revenue receipt. So what is the formula of non-debt receipt? The formula of non-debt receipt is revenue receipt plus NDCR. Where else have you seen this formula? You have seen this formula in fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is equal to total expenditure minus revenue receipt plus non-debt capital receipt. And we have seen this formula. So can we convert the formula of fiscal deficit into total expenditure minus revenue receipt plus non-debt capital receipt? What is this? These two together called as non-debt receipt. So we can also call it as minus non-debt receipt. This is also one of the formulas of fiscal deficit. So fiscal deficit can be calculated using, yes, many methods. There are multiple formulas to calculate. So this is one of the things which was given in the budget. This diagram was given, so I thought that we should definitely take this up. So these are your final things for today's session. There is one more. This is a simple information given in the budget this year. So this is the final thing related to the numbers of this year's budget. So let us see this and try to understand what question can come from there. Dekho, this is a classic one. This is a classic one which comes every year. So it says rupee comes from. So what is the source of government revenue? आपको पता है, there are two sources. One is revenue receipt, one is capital receipts, right? Yeah, it comes every year. So यहाँ पे what question will come in the exam? That out of all the major sources through which the government gets money. So what is the number one source through which the government gets this money? Yes, one of my friend is saying legacy question. Absolutely. So the major source through which the government gets money, 24% of the government rupee or resources comes through borrowing and liabilities. Then you have number two, income taxes 21%, corporation taxes 18%. So first three done. Fourth is GST and others, and non-tax revenue is 10%. You just have to see the top five. You don't have to memorize this percentage, but you should know the sequence. Similarly, if they ask you that where does the rupee go to, matlab they will ask you the question related to expenditure. So how will you memorize the expenditure part? So see, the government of India has to share its resources with the state. That becomes a major part. So aap dekho, what is the source of government? What is the place where government spends its money? So the first thing is the government shares its resources with the states. That's 22%. Number two, government of India has borrowed a lot of money. So interest rate has to be paid. So dekho, second avenue in which the government spends the money is interest payment. The third one is central sector scheme. So central sector scheme is the scheme where the central government puts the money or finances the scheme. And number four is defense. And number five is centrally sponsored scheme. So centrally sponsored schemes are those schemes where the finance is shared between the center and the state. So this was a ritual kind of diagram which always comes in UPSC. Right? They can ask you this sequence. So, bacho, this was something interesting which you should have definitely, noted down. यहाँ से आप note कर लेना that this diagram was given. And yeah, this diagram was given in the budget. So what is the purpose of giving this diagram? The purpose of giving this diagram was to help you guys understand that fiscal deficit is equal to total expenditure minus revenue receipt plus non-debt capital receipt. है ना? ये है. This is the formula. So can you break this down? Revenue receipt. Yeah, you can. So you can break this down to tax revenue plus non-tax revenue plus non-debt capital receipt. So from here you can get the numbers, and this whole thing is called as non-debt receipt. So your formula of fiscal deficit becomes total expenditure minus non-debt receipt. Right? So this was your budget part 2, where we discussed some numbers, and through numbers we were looking at the trend, and through trend we can answer questions in UPSC prelims, and we can also use this knowledge to answer questions in mains. Now, does effective capex dilute the transparency? No, it does not. It in fact gives you a real picture about what the government of India, center and state together, are spending in terms of asset creation. So I would say that it's also one of the methods of bringing transparency. Just like instead of fiscal deficit, debt to GDP is a better method. So thank you so much that you're liking the book also. Thank you. I'm really happy that you feel like an economist, because you see, in future, when you qualify this exam and get into services, you are the ones who will make policies for this country. So of course, if you are learning this, the subject through the sessions that we are having, it's a great thing to know, of course. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Next part will be there, which is part 3. Yes, part 3 will be there. And bacho, while giving you this session, whatever I told you, that thank you so much, Chanchal. So one of your friend is mentioning that, yesterday, about yesterday, I want to thank you again and say sorry as well, because yesterday, a lot of you showed that passion and enthusiasm to attend the lecture offline, and we had the offline sessions. We took 2 offline sessions yesterday. just to make sure that nobody goes without having a one-to-one physical interaction as well in the class along with online. But as you know that looking at your enthusiasm, we understood that it is more practical to have it off online today. So by the way, whatever I told you during the session, that these are the important points that you should note down. You can slow down the video a little bit and you can note that down. And I kept on telling you and pointing out the things which can be asked in prelims. I also told you that there are some things which can be asked in mains as well, wo aapko bataya. So from today's session, but you would have understood one thing for sure, that not every number, data and figure has to be memorized. What you need to do is use the numbers and the figures for calculation, but get a main message out of it. And that message should be used to answer questions in the exam. And we have seen a lot of messages today, right? So thank you so much, guys. Yes, definitely. So whatever is there in the budget, I'll definitely cover it. So whatever important parts I feel is there, we'll definitely cover it. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next session related to the budget, where we'll complete the rest of the things. Definitely. All right. So see you guys, and make sure that for the next class also, you should have the handout. A new handout will be provided to you. So I'll try to provide it on time so that you can use it for the class. So thank you so much. Stay happy and keep studying well and be stress-free. As you can see, that numbers are not at all bad and headache. If you are little friends with numbers and know how to handle them, they can make your life easy. So thank you so much, and God bless you.